20 pieces of great advice from retirees who have big regrets. Guys, leave me some comments. Do you have regrets? Regrets since you've been in retirement. Some things that you look back on and said, you know what? If I knew then what I know now, this is what I do different. So here we go. Here's number 1 of 20. Think about retirement advice 10 years before, not a month before you retire. Okay, we talk about this all the time, right, guys? You got to be prepared for retirement. At least start preparing like non-financially for it at least 5 years before you retire, right? You got to know what you're going to do in retirement. You got to know where you're going to live. All the big stuff. You can't just think, okay, I'm going to wing it. It doesn't work that way. Number 2. Don't overbuild your dream house. Think about it when you get older, okay? When you were like, I don't know, maybe you just started retirement or just before retirement, you built your dream house. It's 2 stories. It's got 5 bedrooms, 4 bath, whatever. How are you going to get around that when you're like 75 or 80? Especially going upstairs. What about cleaning it, right? Okay, you could bring in people to clean it, fine. But when you're 75 or 80, there's just so much more that goes into upkeep of a big house than when you were younger, right? Also, what about the cost? What about when all your children have left? You could have built this when you were 45, right? What about when they leave and it's just you and your husband or you and your wife? All those extra rooms, yes, you can always downsize, but a lot of people have regrets. They built their dream house too big. Number 3. Be careful about moving away from your social network. I read this one story about this very outgoing couple who decided to move in retirement. You know, they had been living in their area for 20, 25 years, tons of friends, tons of social options. They went to a more isolated rural place that looked pretty cool to them, but just like up here where I live in the high desert, you don't have many options. Right? That's why I'm so thankful I can go back and forth to my girlfriend in LA, 2 weeks there, 2 weeks here. I got the best of both worlds, right? I get sick of the traffic, I come up here. I get sick of the quiet, I go down there for all the options. So before you make that leap, value the socialization options you have for where you're at. Hey, for those of you who see me for the first time, my name is Duane, and this is a retirement channel for people on moderate income. If you think you might like that, think about subscribing and like the video as well. Number 4, always know what you're invested in. Read another story where people got into their, I think it was like early 70s, didn't really know, what was going on with their investments. And I don't know how you could do this in retirement, but they hadn't really been looking at their portfolio. They looked at it. It was significantly down. They asked what they were invested in. They were invested a lot more in stocks than they should have been when they were 70 years old. So guys, you got to know these things, right? You got to know what you're invested in, even if it's just index funds. What exactly do those index funds invest in? You don't want a nasty surprise like these people. Number 5, give your kids a good education. Doesn't have to be a great one though. What do I mean by that? Well, here's what I mean. Doesn't have to be private schools. These people, they realized right before they got into retirement that they had spent too much on their children's education. They thought, now this is just their opinion, they could have got just as good as education and jobs at a normal public school. They ended up not having as much as they wanted to in retirement because of it. Number 6, travel when you're young. Okay, we got the go-go years. We got the slow-go years and the no-go years. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. In your go-go years, travel. If you want to travel overseas, now's the time to do it in your 60s, right? Not your 80s. Travel when you're young. Number 7, pay yourself first. What do I mean by that? Well, again, here's what I mean. It means when you get your money, when you're working, put it first into retirement, savings, and an emergency fund. Yeah. That way you will ensure your future. That way you will be insured when any emergencies come up. You should, unless it's a catastrophic emergency, you should have enough to cover those emergencies. So always pay yourself first. Number 8. Now this is a good one. This is a good quote. Carry a torch for optimism and gratitude. I get it. You know, there's always going to be things you wish you had, right? Why not look at the things that you do have? You know, there's something to be said for appreciating the simple things, right? In retirement, you've got all the time in the world to just think, right? My doggies, they're not thinking anymore. They're reacting to something. You got all the time in the world to just think. Think about what you have that is good. Be optimistic about the future. If you're set for retirement monetarily wise, might be pretty good. What is going on, man? It's like a coyote pack down there. Number 9. Don't refinance. Pay off your house. Okay, now I'm not one to really talk about this. I bought this place you see here 6 months into retirement. Okay, but there is a lot to be said for being debt free, especially on your house when you go into retirement. This person, their story was that they refinanced 10 years before retirement. Okay, they could have had their house paid off and they wish they did, but they didn't. So don't refinance, pay off your house. Number 10, get your employer match ASAP. Lots of people I read about, you know, they had started investing. They investing just the minimum amount. Okay, they didn't even invest up to their employer match until much later in their life. They don't have as much money as they should have if they would have done that. Guys, if you think about it, you know, when I first started investing at 35, I was investing like, I don't know, 3-4% when my employer match was 6. Is it really going to be that much more painful, another 2 or 3% on your investing? I don't think so. So make sure you get that employer match. Number 11, have something to do before you retire. Before you retire. In other words, unless you're 75 or 80 and you just retired and you don't really need much to do, especially for those who retired early, you're going to have something to do. Not just one thing, multiple things, so you don't get too bored in retirement. Number 12. This one seems obvious. Don't get a divorce right before retirement. You talk about depleting your nest egg, probably in half. Yeah, I think that's a good one. Don't get divorced right before you retire. 13, your grandkids won't be there as much as you hope for. This is for those of you thinking about, you know, relocating to where your grandkids live, to be around your children and your grandkids. You think you might see them once or twice a week. You know what? That might not turn out that way. Yeah, a lot of times it doesn't. So be careful with that. 14, this is a big one. Live close to medical services. Read a couple stories about where they weren't close to medical services. That extra time that it took them to get to medical services didn't turn out too well for them. It complicated their medical issue because they weren't able to get to an emergency room or even an urgent care in, you know, as soon a time as they should have. 15, get a part-time job in retirement. I talk about this all the time, especially for those of us on moderate income. Some of these people wish they did earlier in retirement so they could have had more peace of mind money. They could have been set up better than they are, in this case, in their 70s. Guys, just because you're retired, don't let people tell you what your retirement should be. If you want to get a part-time job in retirement, it is your retirement. You do whatever you want to make you feel better about your retirement. 16. This one's obvious. Start saving as early as possible. Read tons of stories on this. Yeah, a lot of people wish, like me, I wished, hey, I started saving seriously when I was 40. I wished I would have done it in my 20s. I would not have been on a moderate income retirement now. It would have been much better. Start saving as early as possible, hopefully in your 20s. 17. Stop and smell the roses more often. This goes back up to the attitude of gratitude, right? Again, don't look at your problems. Or sometimes you have to, right, to take care of them. Don't dwell on them. Stop and smell the roses. What do you got going on good in your life that you can concentrate on? Sounds easy. Sometimes it's not. 18. Be greedy. Okay, this was someone who spent their whole career in a public service job. They wished when they got to retirement, maybe they had a different job that paid better. Now, they said they enjoyed their work, but they're not doing that well in retirement because they didn't save enough. They couldn't save enough. Or maybe they could have, but they didn't because they weren't bringing in that much money to begin with. So be greedy, according to this person. Number 19, get in and stay in shape. Hey, that's one thing I have done pretty well over my life. Sometimes I'll go out of shape for a little while, but not too long. I've got to the point where it's like if I'm not working out like at least a couple times a week, I just don't feel good. I don't like the way my body feels. I don't like the way I feel. So that kind of kickstarts me back into motion about working out. Now, if you're sick, if you got a surgery, that's different. I get it. But when you're healthy, when you're able-bodied, work out and keep working out throughout your life. Doesn't have to be anything big. Just if you're consistent about it, that's good. And the final one I have, going back to one of the other points, this person had an emergency and they didn't have an emergency fund. Get an emergency fund. This should go throughout life that you have that going on, right? Something big comes along, you can take care of it if you have at least a 6-month emergency fund. So there you go, guys. Maybe you heard some of those before. I don't think you heard a lot of them, though. So there are great pieces of advice from retirees who regret things they should have done that they didn't. And as always, from the lovely high desert, we got this.